on Arirang News. President Yoon sees a new chapter for business ties with Japan and vows to provide the fullest support for exchanges between business people from the two countries. This as he meets with a group of key business leaders from both countries before returning home from the summit in Japan. President Yoon also stresses active exchanges and cooperation between future leaders of South Korea and Japan. Speaking to students at Keio University, Yoon said it'll not take long for the two countries to feel the synergy coming from the friendship among young people. For the second month in a row, the South Korean government sees its economy is slowing down. This in its monthly assessment amid sluggish outbound shipments and concerns in the financial market. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin tonight with South Korean President Yoon returning from his two-day visit to Japan. Following the summit with his Japanese counterpart in Tokyo, where they pledged to open a new chapter for stronger economic cooperation, President Yoon vows the fullest support for new business collaborations between the two neighbors. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young leads us off.
Restoring and fostering synergy between South Korean and Japanese firms. That's what President Yoon set out to do the morning after a summit with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Attending a business roundtable held in Tokyo on Friday, the president emphasized his hope that bilateral trade and business relations would lead to shared prosperity in the global economy.
두 나라는 공급망, 기후변화, 첨단 과학기술, 경제 안보 등 다양한 글로벌 아젠다에 대해 공동으로 협력하고 대응할 것입니다.
This was the first time since 2019 that a South Korean leader participated in the Seoul Tokyo Business Council Forum. 12 business leaders from South Korea were at the forum, including the acting president of the Federation of Korean Industries and the chiefs of Samsung, LG, SK and Hyundai Motor. Among the 11 Japanese members attending were the heads of Sumitomo Chemical, Hitachi and Mitsubishi Corporation. In his remarks, Yoon called for active cooperation in future high-tech industries, including semiconductors, batteries and electric vehicles. He also mentioned the Korea-Japan Future Partnership Funds jointly announced by South Korea and Japan's business lobbies, conveying his hope that such efforts would lead to stronger relations between the two economic circles and pave the way for bilateral exchanges for future generations. On Thursday, the business lobby said they would each contribute some 1 billion won or over $752,000 to create funds to support joint projects and collaborations, including the promotion of youth exchanges. The private sector effort appears to back the Yoon government's plan to resolve bilateral disputes with Tokyo by compensating victims of Japan's forced labor mobilization through voluntary donations rather than requiring Japanese firms to make reparations. Amid opposition from domestic groups, the President's summit with the Japanese PM has firmly set the trajectory of bilateral ties towards a future-oriented relationship, narrowing differences by focusing on areas of common interest. To promote private sector exchanges, Yoon and Kishida agreed to promptly restore ministerial-level cooperation channels in various areas, from trade and industry to science and technology. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Tokyo.
As we just heard, following the Yoon-Kishida summit, the two nations are seeking economic cooperation for chips and batteries in particular. Our economic correspondent Shin Ah-young looks into its prospects.
Expectations rise for Seoul-Tokyo cooperation in various industries following the normalization of bilateral relations. In fact, the second day of President Yoon visit focused on economic cooperation. Yoon emphasized the importance of working together on new emerging sectors such as semiconductors, batteries, and future cars. One expert also picked the chip and battery industries as areas in which the two countries can look forward to it in terms of cooperation.
I think in the near future, it really depends on mutual research and mutual product development. Korea has a substantial lead even against Japan in areas like electric vehicle batteries, but Japan holds some crucial technologies that can make electric batteries better. So electric batteries, semiconductors, those are the industries that I think will get most benefits from restoration of relationship with Japan.
Meanwhile, finance and foreign exchange are areas that Seoul and Tokyo are expecting to work together on as well. According to the South Korean government, President Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida agreed to put their heads together not only in terms of economic security and high technology, but also in the fields of finance and foreign exchange.
Financial cooperation between South Korea and Japan could be in the form of resuming the currency swap that was done before. If the currency swap is resumed, it could help stabilize the foreign exchange market, as it would increase the supply of foreign currency in times of emergency.
Attention is drawn to whether discussions to resume the Korea-Japan currency swap, which has been suspended since 2015, will begin under the restoration of the Seoul-Tokyo relationship. 신하영, Arirang News.
And President Yoon directs his focus on people amid efforts to improve bilateral ties. Speaking to students at Keio University in Japan, he stresses active exchanges and cooperation between future leaders of South Korea and Japan. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon with more.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says the young generations of South Korea and Japan are the future of the bilateral relationship. This as he wrapped up his visit to Tokyo, where on Friday he visited Keio University and addressed students for a special lecture on the future generations of South Korea and Japan. In the crowd included Korean students studying abroad.
저는 이 자리에서 여러분 미래 세대가 바로 한일 양국의 미래라는 점을 강조하고 싶습니다. 여러분이 미래를 생각하고 한국 청년들과 적극적으로 소통해 나가기를 기대합니다.
This was the first time in 30 years for a South Korean president to address university students in Japan. And the move comes as President Yoon has repeatedly shown hope that civilian exchanges will expand with the improvement of bilateral relations. He also said that South Korea and Japan have shared values in terms of liberal democracy and have been playing an important role in the international community. And that said, the two cooperating will help not just the two countries, but the whole world.
여러분이 한국 청년들과 자유롭고 왕성하게 교류하고 협력한다면 청년 세대의 신뢰와 우정이 가져올 그 시너지를 우리들이 체감하는데 긴 시간이 걸리지 않을 것입니다.
On the political front, he also met with politicians from both sides of the aisle. The leadership of the biggest opposition party in Japan, the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, requested to meet President Yoon at the last minute in a show of bipartisan support for efforts by the two leaders to improve bilateral ties. He also met with cross-border cooperation organizations, including lawmaker groups from South Korea and Japan, as well as a South Korea-Japan Cooperation Committee. Among them was even the former Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga.
양국이 이렇게 정상회담을 갖게 된 것 자체가 양국 관계 정상화 발전에 어떤 큰 진전이라고 생각합니다.
Yoon also made sure to call on the Japanese lawmakers to continue working with their counterparts in South Korea. He underscored the importance of paving the way for young generations of the two countries to continue their exchanges of cultures. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Tokyo.
First Lady Kim Gun-hee says there are no borders for culture and education as she promoted South Korea's cultural exchanges with Japan. This as she visited Tokyo Korean School on Friday and met the students and faculty members, asking them to be the bridge between the two countries. Students said in response that they've been feeling proud of the growing interest in Korean culture and language. She also visited the Japan Folks Crafts Museum, which was created by Muneyoshi Yanagi and houses is his collection of arts and crafts from the Joseon dynasty. The First Lady applauded the collection and said it reflects Yanagi's love for the art of Korea's former state and wished for more exhibitions of his collection in South Korea. In other news, for the second month in a row, the South Korean government sees its economy facing headwinds. This in its monthly assessment amid sluggish outbound shipments and concerns in the financial market. Our Moon Hae-ryun tells us the details.
February saw stunted growth in the job market as well as a decline in exports. According to the latest economic trends report released by the Ministry of Economy and Finance on Friday, monetary tightening across the globe as well as the war in Ukraine has continued to affect the country's economy. Exports fell by 7.5% compared to the previous February. This was attributed to the continued decline in tech exports, falling by 32% on year. Washington's efforts to curb chip exports to China were reflected in the sharp decline in semiconductor shipments, which fell by more than 40%. The country's job market, which has seen continued on-year growth since last year after the easing of some COVID-19 restrictions and the creation of non-contact jobs, notably slowed its pace in on-year growth last month. There were some 310,000 more people in employment this February than in the previous February. But this on-year increase is smaller than in January, when there were 410,000 more people in work than the year before. Despite the continued increase in on-year employment rates, the wholesale and retail sector has seen on-year declines every month since May last year. Last month, the wholesale and retail industry had 76,000 fewer employees than in February last year. Finance authorities also projected a slowdown in inflation, with prices beginning to stabilize for petroleum products and fresh produce, particularly the prices of beef and pork. Consumer prices showed a 4.8% increase on year, but this is 0.4 percentage points less than the increase reported in January. This is also the lowest increase on year since April 2022. However, retail sales, a barometer of private spending, fell by 2.1% on year in January due to weakened domestic demand across all sectors. With the economic slowdown, the Finance Ministry reported that it will concentrate its efforts in increasing exports, improving energy efficiency, and stabilizing consumer prices. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's biotech firm Samsung Biologics will build a fifth factory at its production site in Incheon. Once built, the factory can produce 180,000 liters of biopharmaceuticals, bringing the total production capacity by Samsung Biologics' 5 plants to 784,000 liters. This will make them the world's largest producer of biopharmaceuticals. The company's CEO announced that the $1.5 billion investment plan was passed by its board of directors on Friday. The demand for biopharmaceuticals has been steadily on the rise since the outbreak of COVID-19. Seoul's Trade Ministry says green efforts by the European Union to ultimately boost home production will not discriminate against its trade partners. These words of reassurance follow the EU's plans on Thursday to revamp its policies on green technologies and critical raw materials. The Critical Raw Materials Act will limit imports of any key material from a single third country to 65%, while the Net Zero Industry Act will aim to generate at least 40% of clean technologies within the EU by 2030. Trade officials here have dismissed concerns about these acts serving like the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which provides subsidies only to electric vehicles assembled in North America. Chinese leader Xi Jinping will be paying a visit to Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow next week from Monday to Wednesday. That's according to China's foreign ministry, which said on Friday that the upcoming trip comes at the invitation of Putin, which will be welcoming Xi to Russia for the first time since its invasion of Ukraine over a year ago. The last time the two met in person was back in September during a summit in Uzbekistan. The Kremlin said in a statement that the leaders will be discussing strategic cooperation between the two nations and adding that the number of important bilateral documents will be signed. China has recently been pushing to present itself as a neutral peace broker on the war in Ukraine, an effort many countries in the West have cast doubt on, considering Beijing's growing ties with Moscow. In France, Macron's government forced through plans to raise country's retirement age from 62 to 64 without a parliamentary vote. This has triggered a fierce backlash from opposition lawmakers and workers' unions. Jung Eun-ju has more.
French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday ordered his Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne to wield a special constitutional power to push an unpopular pensions bill through the National Assembly without a vote.
We cannot bet on the future of our pensions. This reform is necessary.
The move, using Article 49, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution, will ensure the bill is adopted despite weeks of protests and debate. President Macron decided to invoke the special power during a cabinet meeting at the presidential palace just a few minutes before the scheduled vote in France's lower house of parliament because he had no guarantee of a majority. Opinion polls show a vast majority of voters oppose the pension reform, as do trade unions who say there are other ways to balance the accounts, including taxing the wealthy more. Macron has made the proposed pension changes the key priority of his second term, arguing that reform is needed to keep the pension system from diving into a deficit. A no-confidence motion expected early next week needs approval by more than half the assembly. If it passes, which would be a first since 1962, the government would have to resign. If no-confidence motions don't succeed, the pension bill would be considered adopted. Nearly 3/4 of the public are opposed to raising the retirement age from 62 to 64, according to polls, and millions have turned up at protests not only in Paris and big cities but also in small towns. Fires burned on the streets of Paris on Thursday night as police fired tear gas to disperse protesters. Massive protests have been held regularly throughout France since mid-January, with millions turning out to voice their opposition to the government's plan. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Since the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, financial institutions there have taken out more in emergency loans from the Federal Reserve than in the worst months of the 2008 financial crisis. According to the Fed data, in the week ending this Wednesday, U.S. banks borrowed almost $153 billion from the Fed's discount window, which provides loans for up to 90 days. The Fed did not say which banks borrowed the money, but the industry has seen a crisis of confidence since the collapse of SVB. Banks also sought nearly $12 billion through the Fed's new bank term funding program. Gwanghwa-시대, where media artworks were displayed at Gwanghwamun Square at the heart of Seoul, has undergone a transformation, becoming a new culture hub known as K-Culture Square. Shin Se-byuk gives us a glimpse of the variety of media arts and installations.
Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul has been transformed into a new cultural hub of South Korea. What used to be Gwanghwa-시대, the media artwork displayed at Gwanghwamun Square, has now been rebranded as K-Culture Square, in line with the government's efforts to promote Korean culture to the overseas market. As South Korean content garners global popularity, K-Culture Square showcases media arts and installations to celebrate Korea's cultural and technological progress. The K-Culture screen installed on the exterior walls of the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History features various types of content. Right across the street from the digital signage, this K-Culture attraction offers an immersive journey back in time. Meet the Joseon Dynasty's legendary war hero, Admiral Lee Sun-shin. Using a panorama screen and a 4D motion chair, Lee's stories are brought to life after more than 4 centuries.
I think it was very interesting that you get to experience the battle as a first point of view rather than seeing in the pictures. So for that, I think it was very nice for him to experience as well, because he was very interested in Lee Sun-shin.
Interactive and immersive media artworks welcome commuters and pedestrians at K-Culture Museum inside Gyeongbokgung subway station. Visitors can enjoy a multi-sensory experience at the exhibition with sight, sound, and even touch. The exhibition's theme of recovery and meditation in a city center creates a peaceful oasis in the midst of bustling urban life, providing visitors with a much-needed escape.
It felt so calming, given that the arts are so in nature, and it's so unique, given that there is no such thing as digital art in the Philippines. It's so amazing, and it's very different from the different museums that I've been to.
The Culture Ministry aims to promote K content to both domestic and foreign tourists through K Culture Square to enhance their experience of Korea's artistic and technological attractions. 신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
This year's Seoul Fashion Week started this Wednesday. The city has been hosting the event with the goal of becoming one of the world's most prominent fashion weeks, alongside the big four fashion weeks, Milan, Paris, London, and New York. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin went there and shows us the latest fashion trends.
Dongdaemun, one of the biggest and busiest shopping hubs in South Korea, transforms into a runway. It's the 2023 Fall-Winter Seoul Fashion Week. Every March and October, Seoul hosts its own fashion week for designers, celebrities, or just anyone with a passion for fashion. Here at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza is South Korea's biggest fashion extravaganza, Seoul Fashion Week. Now, this year's show is the largest since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, with around 30 Korean designers showcasing their works for the upcoming fall and winter season. The event offers the best of both worlds, from young, up-and-coming brands to established high-end labels. Lai is a modern woman's lifestyle brand known for its bold colors and signature mix-and-match style. And it's taking over the fashion world with appearances at Paris and New York Fashion Weeks. Lai's FW collection this year is all about plur, peace, love, unity, and respect.
We're going through a tough time, so I think plur is what we really need. We picked fabrics and colors that could convey these values and collaborated with the Teddy Bear Museum.
Singer Pada and her daughter stole the show, taking to the catwalk together for the event's opener.
It's my first time walking the catwalk with my daughter. It's an unforgettable experience, but I also want to give a shout out to all the kids and their hard-working moms out there.
And one brand you cannot leave out when talking about K-fashion, Miss G Collection. Founded in 1979 by veteran designer Ji Chuni, it's famous for its meticulous tailoring and top-notch fabrics. G's collection centers around evoking warm feelings of love through fitted waists, exaggerated shoulders, and abundant volume based on neutral colors.
COVID-19 forced us to do shows online, so it's our first time meeting the audience face-to-face. I'm a bit nervous and thrilled at the same time.
Back outside, there are pop-up stores like this one where visitors can capture their Fashion Week experience.
You can take pictures from unique angles inside our photo booth filled with mirrors.
So if you're wondering what to wear this fall and winter, Seoul Fashion Week's got your back. 송유진, Arirang News.
Clear skies are in the forecast for the capital region this weekend, but do expect wide temperature gaps of more than 10 degrees, with lows staying in single figures and daytime conditions getting warmer than usual. Under such conditions, it's much easier to catch a cold, so if you take extra care of your health at this time, that would be helpful. And starting tomorrow, western regions, including Seoul, will see high levels of fine dust. This is due to the combination of local emissions and dust flowing in from overseas. Also, the entire nation is currently under dry spells. In fact, dry weather advisories are issued for much of inland regions. For the entire weekend, it will be crucial to take extra precautions against wildfires. And Jeju Island will see brief showers for the morning hours. As for the readings, Seoul will be starting off at 3 degrees Celsius. Highs in Seoul get up to 14 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju 16. Daegu will be topping out at 18 degrees Celsius. And spring-like conditions will prevail over the next few days, and maximum temperatures will keep rising. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of Friday's newscast. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and a good night.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 먹지 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고
좋아요.